There you go. So welcome. We wanted to bring a presentation to you today about Seeds of Empathy. We're from the Roots of Empathy organization. I'm Brenda McCormack. I'm the Director of International Relations and Business Development for the organization. And I have my colleague Lisa McIntosh here with me today, and she oversees our programs in the United States. So we've had the Roots of Empathy program here since 2016. This is our third year of the Roots of Empathy program, and that's our program for elementary school students, children that are from kindergarten to grade 6 here in Hawaii. And we've had programs across, all across Oahu, Maui, the Big Island. We've been in Kauai, and we're heading to Molokai. Am I saying it right? I'm learning. So we're hoping to bring the program there next year. Seeds of Empathy is for our wee little ones, the ones that are 3 to 5 year old in daycare and nursery school settings. And the program is somewhat similar to Roots of Empathy, and in other ways very different from Roots of Empathy. So if you can cue ahead there, Lisa. Roots of Empathy is a program that started in 1996, and it has now reached 12 countries. We've reached over 1 million children worldwide, and then last year, between the Roots of Empathy program and the Seeds of Empathy program, we had over 3,000 tiny teachers that came into the classrooms, those in Roots of Empathy and Seeds of Empathy. Our program is based on the attachment relationship, the early attachment relationship between the parent and the baby. If you click ahead there, Lisa. This is our founder and president, Mary Gordon. And some of you may have heard her speak at the 2015 Schools of the Future conference. She was the keynote speaker here. And after she came and spoke, we were invited here to Hawaii to bring our program by the Hawaii Community Foundation. Mary Gordon started the program 22 years ago. And what she was trying to do is break intergenerational cycles of violence and poor parenting. She saw a lot of suffering in the world back then, probably some of it that we still have today. And she knew that the common denominator in all of that suffering was the absence of empathy. And she thought, where does empathy come from? And she knows that it's from that early attachment relationship, the relationship that we have with our parents when we're very tiny babies, or with that person who cares for us deeply. And she realized that she could bring that attachment relationship into the classroom, like a field trip. It's experiential learning, it's deep learning around a blanket of children, or around a blanket with children. Can you go ahead there? So in the classrooms that you have, both with the little ones and the ones in elementary school, you might see an equation like this up on the board. And it says Johnny has 3 apples, and Emily takes 2 of Johnny's apples. And what type of answer would you see in a typical classroom? What might the children answer there? There's a couple different ideas. Johnny only has 1 apple left. Emily now has more apples than Johnny, but what we talk about in Roots of Empathy and Seeds of Empathy is, how does Johnny feel? Because how Johnny feels about that is going to set him up for the entire rest of the day. So in this scenario, I imagine Johnny walking to school with his 3 lovely apples. And Emily comes and she takes 2 of the apples. And how do you think that Johnny would be feeling? He didn't offer the apples, by the way. She took them. How do you think he might be feeling? Any ideas? Sad? Angry? Frustrated? All of those feelings that Johnny has when she takes his apples are feelings that are going to cause him to have a level of cortisol that's quite high in his body. And when cortisol is way up here, it's very hard to learn. When cortisol is up here, you have very elevated levels. It's damaging to the tiny brain. And we actually have to bring cortisol back down in our bodies to calm ourselves. So when we heard Tina speak yesterday, this is the green zone. Johnny's in the red zone. So in order for Johnny to be able to calm himself, he needs to be emotionally literate. He needs to be able to talk about his feelings, because what we know scientifically is that if your cortisol level is up here because you're sad or you're frustrated, you're angry, and you're able to say, I am feeling very frustrated because Emily took 2 of my apples, the cortisol level comes back down in here to Tina's green zone. And if someone is around by you that can say to you, I could understand why that would make you feel frustrated, the cortisol level comes down even further. This is a learning brain. This is a survival brain. So we need our children to be here, not here. So Seeds of Empathy is for the little 3 to 5-year-olds in nursery school settings or daycare settings. It fosters social and emotional competence, early literacy skills, and attitudes towards learning to read. So it's not a reading program, it fosters those early attitudes. Children need to love to read before they can learn to read. And we also provide professional development to the educators. So I have a very short little video here that I wanted you to watch on Seeds of Empathy, and if everybody can just cross their fingers, we'll see if Lisa can get it going.
There is an ongoing global search for renewable resources. The Roots of Empathy organization has identified the most powerful resource of all, the power of empathy in our children. Seeds of Empathy was created in 2005 and was designed for children 3 to 5 years of age attending early learning centers. The program fosters social and emotional competence and early literacy skills in young children and provides professional development for early childhood educators. The two key components of Seeds of Empathy are learning to read and learning to relate. The Seeds of Empathy Early Literacy Program engages children through quality children's literature paired with relational and sensory-based experiences and interactive learning. At the heart of every Seeds of Empathy program is a baby and a parent who visit an early learning center throughout the program year. Here, the baby is the teacher. The children are guided to observe and identify with the baby's emotions and are coached to relate to their own experiences and feelings, and to the feelings of others. Through the baby, the children learn about empathy, the ability to understand how others feel. In Seeds of Empathy, early childhood educators receive training and professional development that helps to support them in reaching the children on an emotional level and to create a trusting relationship. The relationship that an early childhood educator has with a child is very powerful. It promotes positive attitudes towards learning and nurtures a child's future success.
School readiness is a mindset, not a skill set. It's not just about numbers and letters. It's about children who feel excited, confident and curious, creative and emotionally ready to problem solve, to cope with stress, and to learn.
The goal of Seeds of Empathy is to nurture emotional literacy and positive attitudes towards traditional literacy. Created by Mary Gordon, Seeds of Empathy emerged from the international success of the award-winning Roots of Empathy program, which she developed in 1996. The highly successful and innovative Seeds of Empathy program has been established across Canada, the United States, and the UK, and has received invitations from around the world to expand into other countries.
One of the milestones of the last century was to walk on the moon. It's our hope that in this century, we will learn to walk in one another's shoes and embrace empathy, the ultimate human trait.
The mission is to build caring, peaceful, and civil societies through the development of empathy in children and adults. The vision is changing the world, child by child.
So Seeds of Empathy is based on the school year, like Roots of Empathy is, and there's 9 themes in Roots of Empathy. It comes across on a 3-week cycle. In the first 2 weeks of the cycle, you have literacy circles, where children learn about a theme that they're going to be talking about when this baby comes. And the themes are really about feelings. My favorite one is feeling grumpy, because when you're 3 years old, you might just feel grumpy. So they have 2 weeks of literacy circles. There's 20 books in our program. Each theme has 2 books, and I'm going to talk more about that. The childcare staff are trained to deliver the program, and they work in a team approach. So we typically have 4 people in a center that are trained to deliver this program. We have an administrator, and that's the person that takes care of the paperwork. We have someone that delivers the family visit, so when the baby comes and the children sit around a lavender blanket, and I'll talk more about that. And then we have 2 literacy coaches that read those books to the children. So it's a social emotional competence building program, and that's our family visit part of the program. The children sit around a rectangular lavender blanket. In Roots of Empathy it's green, but in Seeds of Empathy it's lavender. And this parent and baby come into the center once every 3 weeks with their tiny baby, who is between 2 and 4 months old when we start the program. So you can click ahead there, Lisa, because there's our baby. At the heart of the program is a family. And that's that early attachment relationship. So this little baby at the beginning of the program year in September is between 2 and 4 months old. There's 3 different t-shirts that follow this baby throughout the year because they grow a little bit each time that they come into the classroom. And the children sit around the lavender blanket, and it's experiential learning. And we train our family guides to ask experiential questions of the children. So we don't teach the children in Seeds of Empathy, we reach the children. So we're asking them, how do you think the baby is feeling? And how can you tell the baby's feeling that way? So we're teaching these wee little children to read the facial cues and body language of this baby. And the beautiful thing about babies, other than they're beautiful, is that in that 30-minute visit, you get every emotion imaginable and very quick changes in between. So our family guides are coached to continue to ask, oh, and now how do you think the baby's feeling? And how can you tell? Can you hear the noises that the baby's making and what's happening to the baby's face? And these little babies, of course, don't hide a thing. So you know exactly how they're feeling. And then we can ask the little ones, and how are you feeling? And have you ever felt a time like the baby is feeling? So if you click ahead there. We also have the literacy circles. So the first 2 weeks of the program are literacy circles. And we gather around this little lavender blanket, the round one, because we're trying to create a very intimate space for reading. And there's 2 books for each literacy circle. So the literacy coaches is the other role that we have. And these 2 literacy coaches take these 2 books that we have in Seeds of Empathy. And in week 1, I would be reading the first book and Lisa would be reading the second book. And after the reading of each book, you can click ahead there, Lisa. And again, I think, we have different activities that the literacy coach can be doing with the students. So they read through this book and then they choose the activity that the literacy coach likes the best. So we always say to them, if you don't like drama, please don't do it, because you can't fake it with children. They know you're not having a good time. So what do you like to do? And maybe they say, well, I really like art, then do art. So there'll be all these different activities that are related to that book. And the literacy coach would read the book and do the activity. The next week, they would swap the books. So I would take book number 2 and Lisa would take book number 1 and we'd read that book again. So each child hears that same book from 2 different people. And you know yourself that the way that you read the book may be different from the way that your colleague reads the book. And you would probably be doing a different activity with the book. So the children then get the experience of these 2 books from each person. So they're having 4 literacy circles within those first 2 weeks of the program. And then the family visit comes in. So we have the 2 weeks of the reading, and then the family comes in. So it's also professional development for our early childhood educators. So the professional development that they receive is in that initial training. All 4 members of this team are going to come together for a 2-day training session. And we're going to teach them all about the knowledge base and the philosophies of our program and all the things that we bring into it. And we're helping them increase their knowledge of early development of these little 3 to 5-year-olds. And we're also helping promote empathy within them. What we have found is that children respond very well to those people who take care of them when they're 3 to 5-year-olds. They spend as much time with those people in waking hours as they do their parents quite often. And they've come to love them, so we want to help nurture that relationship. Because if someone loves you, you can learn from them. Can you go on there, Lisa? There we go. So the goals within the program for the children are that we want to foster the development of empathy and emotional literacy. And I'm going to talk again in a moment about empathy and emotional literacy, but we also want to build social and emotional understanding in these wee little ones. Our program has been proven, the Roots of Empathy program, that children that participate have a reduction in aggression and an increase in prosocial behavior. To date, there hasn't been research done on the Seeds of Empathy program, but our philosophies are so much aligned that our goal of this program is also to help develop those early prosocial behaviors. Things like empathy, caring, sharing, being inclusive of others and being helpful. And we want to reduce aggression, including bullying in children. Children who understand how the other person feels are less likely to hurt that other person. We also want to develop positive attitudes and competencies towards early literacy. So really creating that early love of reading and understanding how reading works, what the books are all about. Our goals, oh, I've lost one slide. Okay, that's all right. So emotional literacy is the ability to recognize, understand, and express your own emotions. We live in a very emotionally illiterate world. We have a very hard time in many cultures expressing our emotions. We know that it's okay to say, I'm happy, I'm excited, all of those. But what happens about Johnny if he's feeling very frustrated? We need to have Johnny be able to understand what that emotion is. What does it feel like when you get frustrated inside? What are those feelings that you have? And we use the observation of that tiny baby in order for Johnny to understand, what does that feel like inside? And he can think, well, my heart starts to go fast, I get a little sweaty, my tummy gets upset. So that the next time he's feeling frustrated, he's able to recognize that. If you're able to recognize your emotions, then you can regulate them. But if you don't know what that is that you're feeling, how are you ever going to calm? So we help children develop emotional literacy by observing and labeling the baby's emotions. By having the instructor say, oh, how is baby feeling? Look at baby Ella. How do you think she's feeling when she's trying to reach the toy? And they'll say, I think she's feeling frustrated. And then we're able to say to them, have you ever felt frustrated? One little girl said to me, I felt stress-strated. And I said, what is that? And she said, I was stressed and I was frustrated. So that's a very emotionally literate little girl. She knew what she was feeling inside. And when you know that it's feeling stress-strated, then you can do something about it. But if you don't know what's happening, then your behavior is going to show that you don't know what's happening to your body. Then we want children to have comfort in discussing their emotions. So we create a very risk-free learning environment. In both of our programs, we always thank children for their answers. We don't judge them or praise them. We always just say thank you because we're asking them what they think and how they feel. And in that environment, you can just say thank you. So we find that children find their voice in Seeds of Empathy. They have the very early years of learning how to put up your hand, how to contribute in a group, how to make your thoughts known, but also how to listen to the thoughts of others. So in Seeds of Empathy, we read a lot of literature. And what we're doing is we're helping children develop their perspective-taking skills, using their imagination, listening to stories about other people in these books. It's a very safe way of opening the door to feelings. So we say to them, how do you imagine this boy in the book felt? We have this great book where Michael wants to sit on his mom's lap and here his little sister wants to come and squeeze on too. How do you think Michael might be feeling? Well, she might be feeling jealous, we hear. And what does your body feel like when you're feeling jealous? Or you're feeling frustrated or angry or very, very sad? So we're having them use those books in order to take the perspective of the characters in the book. And then we help children with their emotions. So there's two parts to empathy. There's the cognitive aspect of empathy, which is perspective taking, being able to put yourself in another person's shoes. But then there's the affective side, which is the emotional side. So by teaching children emotional literacy, being able to express their emotions, and the perspective taking skills that they learn from our observing this baby around the lavender blanket or by reading literature, we're bringing those two parts together and helping the children to develop empathy. Children who are empathic and understand their own feelings are better able to regulate their own emotions. So self-regulation is the ability to manage and recover from stress. And if you heard Tina speak yesterday, she talked about the children being in the red zone. That's stress. But being able to manage that, being able to understand why you're feeling the way that you're feeling. and possibly getting help by saying, I'm feeling very frustrated because Emily took 2 of my apples, is helping them manage and recover from stress. This is a little bit of a stressful world that our children are living in. Children have not changed over the years. We're all the same that we were. But the landscape in which they live has changed dramatically. And I'm hearing over the last 2 days that there's many children sitting in classrooms today that are feeling quite stressed. And we have to be able to help them recover and manage that stress, because if they're in that red zone that Tina talked about and not in the green zone, they can't learn. So as educators, all the wonderful things that you planned for them that day, right? All the great things that you think about, if Johnny isn't able to recover from the frustration that he's feeling and put himself here, then he's not going to be able to learn anything that you had planned for him that day. So the other thing that we teach little children about in Seeds of Empathy is temperament. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about temperament today, because temperament is something that's going to help all of you as well understand maybe not only yourself, but everyone in your life. So Seeds of Empathy and Roots of Empathy is built upon relationships. And how do we get along with one another? So the temperament traits that we've adopted as an organization come from the work of Stella Chess and Alexander Thomas, who are 2 researchers from New York that worked with a group of people over a 40-year period. So this is a longitudinal study. And what they determined at the end of the 40 years is that everyone is born with a set of temperament traits. And these are the temperament traits that they've identified in their work. And then each one of these temperament traits, we all sit somewhere on a continuum from one extreme to the other. So we help little children in Seeds of Empathy understand their own temperament by highlighting that temperament in the baby. So often the little baby on this lavender blanket is very wiggly. Their little legs are kicking and their arms are kicking the whole time. And we say to the children, look at our baby. Is our baby very high in activity? Or is our baby low in activity? Or maybe somewhere in the middle, because it's a continuum. But are you high in activity like the baby? And they start to think, yeah, my body likes to move around all the time. And there's other children who like to sit quite still. But it's often really refreshing to those little ones to know it's okay. Temperament is the package that you came in. Any person here who has more than 2 children know that temperament is innate. It's something that we're all born with. It's the package that we came in. And often as a parent, it might not be the package that you ordered. Right? So one of the temperament traits that we talk a lot about in Seeds of Empathy is intensity. Intensity is the strength in which you show your emotions. Think about some of those children that you work with, or maybe even your own. Some children are very high in intensity. When they're sad, you sure know it. They cry very loud and very, very long. When they're frustrated, their whole body gets frustrated. Their face turns red, they shake. When they laugh, they've got that beautiful belly laugh. So they show their emotions very strongly. And we show the children that on this lavender blanket with this wee baby, because babies that come into Seeds of Empathy classrooms often cry in that 30 minutes. They get over it, but they often cry. And we help children understand themselves, and we say, wow, our baby has a very loud cry. The little wee ones cover their ears because they don't want to hear the baby cry. But then we say to them, who here has a really, really loud cry? When you're feeling very sad, do you cry very hard, or do you have a little teeny cry? Because often children who are very high in intensity get picked on in school because you can push their buttons. It's often a bit of a show. If they're very high in intensity and they get really angry, it's sometimes fun for little ones to kind of pick on them a little bit, get it going, see what show they can get. But for them to know that it's okay, just like our tiny baby has a very loud cry, some of us have a loud cry too. Thinking about sensitivity, there's some babies that come onto the lavender blanket that are very sensitive. They don't like anything touching their skin. And it helps the little children around the lavender blanket when you say, who else doesn't like things touching their skin? If you look in that little classroom, all the children there, look in the back of their shirts. Some of them have the tag cut out because those tags drive them crazy. Is there anybody here like that has cut all the tags out of the back of their shirts? Because the tag, the itchiness bothers some people. Other people could care less. It all depends on if you're high in sensitivity or low in sensitivity. Children who are very high in sensitivity, and when I think about sensitivity, I'm thinking about the 5 senses. So I just talked about touch. But if you think about hearing, some people are very sensitive to sound and different sounds and intensities of sounds. So children who are in a childcare center that has seeds of empathy come to understand that I don't like loud sounds. And it's okay to cover my ears if I don't like loud sounds. And then there's other children that are not bothered by it at all. Some of those little people are very sensitive to smell, just like we are. You know, have you ever noticed that you can walk through somewhere and it doesn't bother you at all? But your colleague that you're walking beside, when you walk through Macy's in that perfume department, it really quite bothers them. Because we all have a different sensitivity. Some of us are very highly sensitive, and some of us it's lower when we talk about our senses. But we also talk about emotional sensitivity. Some people are more emotionally sensitive than other people. And you might find those little people in the daycare setting, you're going to find some of them that are quite emotionally sensitive, especially when their day's not going okay. And we teach them that it's okay. We're all different. We are all born with a different set of temperament traits. Thinking about adaptability. Some people are very high in adaptability, and some people here are very low in adaptability. People who are high in adaptability can go with the flow. Change doesn't bother them. Anybody here would say that they're high in adaptability? Have a plan B in your back pocket? But there's other people who change really bothers them. When they think their day's going to go a particular way and it gets changed, it might just derail the whole thing. Some of those little people that come into daycare settings or our classrooms in schools are very low in adaptability. So they thought that they were going to come in and on the board it was going to say that they were going to do math, and then they were going to have literature, and then they were going to go for recess, and then they were going to talk about geography or whatever they were going to do. And if you switch that up as the teacher, you've just derailed some kids' entire day. They cannot recover from it. So we help children in Seeds of Empathy understand that sometimes it's really hard for us to have a change from one activity even to the next when you're in daycare. Mary Gordon's son, Eric, I can pick on him because he's not here, is very, very low in adaptability. Change was really hard for him. He's 30-something now. But when he was a little guy, Mary told me that getting up in the morning and changing from his jammies to his school clothes was impossible because he's very low in adaptability. So what Mary used to do is they would have dinner, then bath, and then put on your school clothes. And then you go to bed. And then when you get up in the morning, you pop out of bed and you're ready to go. Because it wasn't worth it for her to try to get those clothes on in the morning and get him to school. He wasn't going to learn that day because that change bothered him so much. Now, I don't think he goes to school with his, or goes to bed at night with his clothes on, because he learned about himself. He learned that we all have different levels of adaptability, and change is hard for me. So he has to plan ahead. This is where I always pick on my husband too, because my husband's very low in adaptability. He wouldn't say he was, but he is. And it's not good or bad, it's just who he is. But one night we were going out for dinner to this steak restaurant, and when we got there, it said, "We're having a holiday party tonight and we're closed. You know, thanks, come again another time." Well, we didn't even have dinner that night because he couldn't recover from that disappointment. I was like halfway to Boston Pizza, like whatever, it doesn't matter, right? I can go with the flow, but the disappointment that he felt overwhelmed him. And many of the children in your classrooms are like that. When they face disappointment, it overwhelms them and it really shuts them down. They get right up there in that red zone and they can't recover from it. So again, they're not learning that day. Mood is something else that we talk a lot about in Seeds of Empathy and Roots of Empathy, because some of these little babies that come in, and let's look at this little girl here. Some of them present themselves and we call them a sunrise baby. And then there's some babies who are sunset. And we say they're both beautiful, but they definitely present themselves differently. So a sunrise baby is a baby with a big smile on their face. You know, they often see the world as more optimistic as adults. And there's some people who are, we call them our philosopher kings. We have these tiny little babies that come in 10 times over the school year and they don't barely crack a smile. You know, these poor instructors that are working with them are doing backflips trying to get this baby to smile, and they're just figuring out their world. They're just really deep thinkers, and it's okay, because you know you have children in your classrooms that are very deep thinkers. But what happens often to those little children are people are always saying to them, what's wrong? What's the matter? What are you thinking about? It doesn't mean they're not happy. It doesn't mean that they don't feel joy. It just means that they present themselves a little bit differently than this sunrise person sitting next to them. And if we had a whole world of sunrise people, I honestly think that might be exhausting. We all can't be Pollyannas, right? We need both. And we tell kids, it's okay. It's who you are. It's the temperament that you're born with. Activity level is one often too, and you'll be able to see that when you have these little people in a center. Some of them almost vibrate. Their little legs are going the whole time. Or in a classroom, you can look under the desks and their legs are going like this. They have to expend energy on a regular basis. Some children can sit quite still for a long time. But children in Seeds of Empathy are quite relieved to hear that we just call it high activity. You're just high in activity like our baby Daniel. Or you're very low in activity like our baby Joe. It's not hyper and lazy. It's just who they are, and we're all different. Rhythmicity is an interesting one too. I love when new parents get a baby that's high in rhythmicity. That means they like to sleep at the same time, they like to eat at the same time. You can tell the time of the day from the dirty diapers. Their bodies are on a very predictable schedule. Their biological functions are very regular. Those parents think they're brilliant because they've got this baby on a routine. You know, my baby's on a routine, it's only a week old. Well, your baby's high in rhythmicity and you had nothing to do with it. And then they get the second baby. And the second baby's low in rhythmicity. And this baby never sleeps at the same time. Some nights wakes up 3 times a night, sometimes wakes up 5 times a night. And they think, what in the world happened? I was like a brilliant parent 2 years ago and now I can't do a thing right. And it really has nothing to do with their parenting other than they're going to have to change their parenting approach. What worked for that first baby that was very high in rhythmicity is going to have to be adjusted for this next baby who's very low in rhythmicity. That baby that you prepare their lunch for, and these little ones in daycare, one day, you know, at 8 o'clock in the morning, they're starving and you figure, okay, I figured this out. 8 o'clock is when they like to eat their breakfast. And the next day at 8 o'clock, you cook them a wonderful breakfast and they go, no, I'm not hungry. But a child who's high in rhythmicity typically would want to eat at the same time. They do make them a little easier to parent and a little easier to teach. But these little tiny ones around the lavender blanket, we want them to know it's okay. It's just who you are. It's the package that you came in. First reaction is an interesting one as well, because you know from working with children, some children are very cautious in their first reaction. You can think about some of those. And some children are very adventurous. So those are the two ends of the continuum, and then we have everybody in between. So those cautious children really like to think about things. They don't want to jump right into an activity. They do a little bit more planning, a little bit more thinking about it. The cautious children are the ones that you take to a birthday party and they kind of cling to your leg. And they kind of take a look around and they want, oh, okay, there's the ball pit and I see a couple friends over there. But there's some adventurous children that are in that ball pit before mom even gets through the door. My daughter's a very cautious girl. So she always wanted to cling pretty close, and that was okay because I knew that in time she would warm up to the activity. Unfortunately for her, sometimes by the time she warmed up to the activity, they were handing out the goodie bag. But she liked to really plan and think things through. She decided about a year ago that she wanted to go skydiving. So it's a year later and she has not gone skydiving, but it's in the planning stages. So she likes to research how you do this, what are the best companies to work with, what kind of plane do I want to jump out of, what's about the chute, are there different chutes? Her friend Ryan is very adventurous in his first reaction. So one day she says, I think I'm going to go skydiving. So she called Ryan and said, Ryan, I think I'd like to go skydiving. Would you like to go with me? And he said, excellent, I'm off tomorrow, let's go. So Ryan is very adventurous in his first reaction, and Emily is very cautious in her first reaction. But think about those little children that you have there in your classrooms. Some of them are very cautious. They don't like new food. They don't like new subjects. They don't like new books. My son's a bit cautious too. A book has to kind of sit in his room and get the right smell before he's going to open that book. Or try on a new pair of pants. Sometimes I have to hang him in there and kind of get them touching the other things before he really wants to accept it. But those adventurous children often get hurt. physically and emotionally, because they're the ones that jump right into things. They might be jumping right into that ball pit or jumping right into a relationship because they're more adventurous, they're more impulsive than children who are cautious. Persistence. So some children are very high in persistence. They just keep trying and trying and trying, often not getting frustrated. But there's other children who get very frustrated easily. And it's hard to really try something that's hard for you if you get frustrated very easily. You'd rather stop that activity. And persistence is one that's a little bit unfair in life, I think, because a lot of us right now are talking about perseverance as being a character trait. Well, if you're high in persistence, that's a piece of cake. You can tick that box right away. But think about those kids that are low in persistence, that trying hard is really, really hard for them. That's their temperament. That's who they are. They get frustrated very, very easily. But for those children, if we can help them become emotionally literate and help them understand what it feels like inside their bodies when they're feeling frustrated and help them regulate that emotion, then it's going to be easier for them to persevere. So Roots of Empathy and Seeds of Empathy is called the #1 resilience building program in the world by Dr. Bruce Perry, because we help children understand what it feels like when they're feeling a particular way and then deal with it. So we tell children in Roots of Empathy and Seeds of Empathy that there's no feelings that are bad, that all feelings are okay. It's okay to be frustrated. Every single one of us has felt frustrated or angry or sad or disappointed, just like we've all felt excited and happy and joyful. But some emotions you have to deal with. And if you're feeling frustrated because you're very low in persistence, then what tools can we give those children in order to keep their frustration level down and give them the opportunities to keep trying? So we're helping children build those skills around a beautiful lavender blanket with a baby on it. Who wouldn't be able to learn in that environment? And before that little baby comes in, all these little children stand around the lavender blanket. And mom or dad come in with the baby. And mom or dad stop in front of each child for 3 seconds. And we sing to the baby. So we sing, "Hello, baby Ella, and how are you? How are you? How are you?" And mom stops in front of each child. And each child gets about 3 seconds to make a connection with that baby if the baby's going to look at them. And what happens when you look into a baby's face, even when you're 3 years old, is the level of oxytocin in your body goes up. That's that nice hug hormone that we have. So when you look at a baby and you go, "Aw," that's oxytocin. It's what makes us care for babies when they wake us up at 3 o'clock in the morning. They still look so darn cute, right? It's that hormone that helps us in our body actually bring cortisol down. So those little children, whatever has happened to them in that day or that week between one visit to the next, are put in a beautiful place for learning around this lavender blanket. And we talk about, what do you do when you're feeling really frustrated? How can you help yourself? Or who helps you? Because often what happens is these little babies on the lavender blanket start to cry in Seeds of Empathy. They laugh, they cry, you get all of the emotions. But when they start to cry, mom or dad picks up those babies and they start to soothe the baby. So mom or dad are helping the baby emotionally regulate. And we emotionally regulate through our senses. So from the baby feeling mother's touch, smelling mom, seeing mom, hearing mom, because often, when with babies you go, shh, shh, shh. With your own babies, you probably had a very particular sound that helped calm that baby, some noise that you were able to make. And we say to the children, how is mom helping baby calm down? And how do you calm yourself down? Who helps you? So they're in this beautiful environment where they can actually think about those things. Because often when children are frustrated, their behavior shows it quite evidently. And we're saying to them, you calm down. Well, they can't calm down. Because honestly, in that point, just like Dr. Tina said yesterday, they can't even hear us. When you're stressed, all of the changes in your body make it very hard to learn to listen to other people, to be present in the situation. So we're helping children build those skills at a time when they're not frustrated, when they're not angry, when they're not scared, when they're sitting around a beautiful lavender blanket with a baby there. The last temperament trait is distractibility. How many people here think they might be high in distractibility, which means every time there's a noise somewhere, you've got to kind of take a look. Yeah. And then there's some of us that are probably very low in distractibility. When you get your mind on something, you cannot get it off. So babies who are very high in distractibility are very easily soothed. They also make their parents think they're brilliant because you can draw their mind away from what's bothering them very quickly. But children who are very high in distractibility struggle in school because every noise that happens, it could be the air exchange unit, it could be the door opening or closing, takes their attention away from what they're doing. But other children are very low in distractibility and they can really focus on whatever it is that they're to be paying attention to. So I just thought today it might be helpful for you to hear about temperament and how we talk about temperament in Roots of Empathy and Seeds of Empathy to help the children. And we brought some handouts for you because I thought that it might be helpful for you to read through and think more about the children in your lives and maybe even your partners in your lives. Except that don't go home tonight and say, okay, I figured out what's wrong with you. Because remember I said it's okay. It's just who we are. It's the package that we came in. And you're probably thinking a little bit now about your own temperament. And Stella Chess and Alexander Thomas, the reason that they did this study is because they were family counselors. They were actually a married couple. And I figure what happened was they had 2 children and they were so opposite. They thought, how in the world did this happen? But they wanted parents to understand why sometimes it's a very good fit between you and one of your children. And sometimes it's more like this. Sometimes it's more like this. So it's a goodness of fit. But I think you can also take it into education because as teachers and educators, we know that there's some children in the classroom that it's just like this. And it's because it's your temperament and their temperament that have come together. Where some children, it's like, oh, you're just lovely. Because this feels so much better than this feels. So having a better understanding of these little people. My own son, who I love to pieces, I thought he was trying to drive me crazy. I thought you were put on this earth to make me mad. But he wasn't. It's just that our temperaments are like this. And this doesn't mean that you always have to be like this. Now that I understand his temperament and he understands mine, we're a bit more like this. Because I understand why he reacts to the world the way he does. And he understands the way that I react to the world, which is our temperament. So that's Seeds of Empathy and Temperament. Are there any questions that you have about either? Yes?
You said that the more intense kids, they tend to get picked on because they show their feelings.
Mm-hmm.
How do you work with that? Like for them not to get picked on or helping them manage getting that, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's just having an awareness. So what that helps you do, temperament helps you do, is become self-aware. Who am I and how do I react to the world? So back to my poor son, he's a very highly intense person. When he's angry, boy, you know it. And when he's happy, you know that too. But he was the one that got picked on at school. So once he learned about his own intensity and know that I get angry very, very fast, he kept himself out of situations where he might get that angry. Or he became aware, I see what's happening here and I know what's going to happen next. So being self-aware is a very important social emotional competency. We're helping children understand who they are, why they react to the world the way they do. And if they do know that, then they can act appropriately in appropriate situations. Does that help? Good. You're welcome. Any other questions? The other thing that I brought today is a temperament map. So this lists all the 9 temperament traits that each one of us has. And I'm going to hand these out because it's a fun activity. Think about someone in your life. It can be somebody that's like this with you or someone that's like this with you. And map them out on the temperament map. Maybe put an X where you think that they are. Because remember, it's all on a continuum from one extreme to the other. Our temperaments in those specific temperament traits are more obvious when we're at one end or the other. But you could be anywhere in between. And then think about yourself. And maybe you're going to be circles. So on that same line, put a circle for yourself. And it helps you understand relationships and why some people are easier to get along with than other people. And why people react ways that might bother you or that you might enjoy. So I'll give each one of you one of these temperament maps and a copy of our document here that talks about temperament. And it outlines each one of the 9 temperament traits. and what you might see in children that are at the high level and the low level of each one of those temperament traits. Okay, so Lisa and I can hand these out to you. And we have some more material up here about roots of empathy and seeds of empathy if you're interested. Okay? Any other questions? No? Yes?
I was looking at the list and I was thinking that only perhaps temperament trait that I think as a parent or a teacher that you wouldn't want to, even though it's kind of how we're hardwired and it's the package we come in, that you wouldn't want to reinforce is just, if you know that you have a child who's low in persistence per se, right? Like I think of a child who, as they're going across the monkey bars, and you've probably all seen those children where their muscles begin to fatigue and their arms shake and they drop to the ground and they're like, I'm done with this, I'm going to go to the slide.
Yeah.
Versus we have some kids, their muscles fatigue, their arms begin to shake, and they fall to the ground and they're like, I'm going to do it again.
Yes.
And I think like after working with a variety of ages, I used to work more early childhood and now I work with middle schoolers, that I think sometimes if we reinforce or allow them to give it too easily, then in life, when they get older, life's challenges, it's like they feel like they keep getting stuck and they can't get away from a challenge.
Yeah, yeah.
So I feel like that's the only one, like you were saying, that like people who are persistent, it's like they get like a badge of honor.
Yeah.
And the ones who are not, if we sometimes go, the path of more resistance is the path you should take, right?
So I think what's important there, if you have a child who's very low in persistence and wants to stop because it's hard, they get frustrated easily, or they move on like that, I think just validating their feeling. I know it's really hard for you. I know that you get frustrated when you're trying to do something very hard. Do you want to try it again? So just validating how they're feeling, I think, is really important for children. And that's the story of Johnny. Just by someone saying to him, I could understand why you're feeling frustrated, put him in a different place for learning. So just acknowledging those children's feelings. And I think many children who are low in persistence stop an activity because they get easily frustrated. Not always, but that's often a reason that they do. So if they're able to say to you, I don't want to do that on the bars anymore because it makes me feel frustrated. And you can say, I could understand why that makes you feel frustrated. That must be very hard for you. They're more likely to try again just by having it. But if the frustration's not validated, then they're more likely to walk away because they want that feeling to go away. Does that make sense? Good. Any other questions? Yes.
When you're talking with families about the children in the classroom, about their children, oftentimes they are seeing a different child than they are in the classroom, either one side of the spectrum or the other. So how do you know what's actually hardwired and what's, because if the parents are like, what? They do that? And then, so it's kind of, it's hard to put them on that map that you were talking about.
Yeah, so where you might put them on the map might be different than where mom and dad puts them on the map, because when children are in school, I think that they're feeling a little bit different about things and they might not be feeling entirely like themselves. And we recognize that because we have a newsletter that goes home to parents of children in Roots of Empathy. And we talk about each one of these temperament traits and we tell the parents, this is how they might react at home and this is how they might react at school, because they're completely different. But when you see a child that's probably is in a calmer state, you're going to get more of what their temperament is all about. So often that happens at home. So sometimes kids spend their whole day being just lovely at school, and it's taking every ounce of energy that they have. And then they get home and they have a complete meltdown, because that took a lot for them to get through, depending upon their temperament. If they're high in distractibility, but they knew, boy, if I don't pay attention all day today, I'm going to get myself in trouble, then that was causing them a lot of anxiety to really focus. So I think you get that more natural what their temperament is about at the end of the day rather than when they're at school with you. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
I don't teach children. I'm not faculty, but it was just something that I observed too. When with children,
I understand the temperament traits, but when they manifest certain behaviors, it's because some of them, they learn what can they get away with, and they know which adults are sensitive to these things.
Mm-hmm.
So children could be angelic, but
Mm-hmm.
it could be something else.
Mm-hmm.
So as adults, I think we regulate our own behavior.
Yeah.
We try to respond to these behaviors.
And they have to learn to regulate their own as well, but all of their behaviors come from their feelings. And if a child's feeling frustrated, you're going to see what that looks like. And what I always say, and it's hard for educators to understand this, but there isn't a child in the world that wakes up and says, oh, I'm going to be bad today, right? And you can't make a child be good by making them feel bad. So, you know, the behaviors that you see that you don't want to see are often tied to a feeling. And often those feelings might be related to their temperament. So I think it's understanding their temperament and then next their feelings and having them understand their feelings, that it's okay to feel all those different things that you feel. One beautiful thing about our program is it teaches children that we could all have a similar experience and feel very differently about it. So more in Roots of Empathy than in Seeds of Empathy, I've had experience with this, that when they're about 6 or 7 years old, we have an activity where we ask them, how did you feel when you lost your first tooth? And you get everything from, it was the best thing that ever happened to me, I was excited, to I was scared to death. So there they are learning that everybody has a different reaction to the same life experience. And I think that's very valuable too. So children being able to manage their emotions, you're going to see a different behavior. Does that help at all?
Yes.
Good. Good. Anyone else? No? We're going to be sticking around for a few minutes, so if any questions come to your mind, feel free to come and ask. But we'd like to give you one of these about temperament and also the temperament map so that you can figure out the people in your life. And any other literature we have here, please feel free to come and take it. Okay, so thank you so much for coming today.